Do you find yourself multitasking frequently? And if you do you find it, or do you think it's a help for your productivity and efficiency? Or do you think it's more of an obstacle for your productivity and efficiency? I'm going to be talking a lot about that today, and what multitasking means and what we're really doing when we multitask. So I'm really happy to welcome people in. I see people joining in, so I'm so glad to see people joining in. We have a topic that is so important and so relevant. I get asked a lot about multitasking and whether it helps or not. So I think that this topic is going to be really useful to a lot of people. I do want to welcome people who are joining in. I see Sposola Mata, and I see Eileen, and I see a few people with us. So I am so happy to welcome everybody. Eileen put in, "Hi, Dr. Ellen." Hello, Eileen. I love when people in our community put in hello to us because we really are a community, and I'm part of the community. So I'm so happy when people say hello to me. When people say hello to everybody, that just makes me feel so happy, and that we are building a community. So please feel free to say hello in the comments if you are here. And if you're watching this on replay, please say hello also, because I do look back and see who's been with us. So again, I'm happy to welcome everybody. And let's talk about multitasking. So for busy people, I think it's instinctive to think, well, I have a lot to do. So if I do 2 or 3 or a few things at the same time, I can get more done in less time. But is that really true? Is that really what happens when we multitask? So I'm going to talk about what the research shows us. But first, because I like, and it's really popular when I present our programs in a workshop format, I'm going to tell you the 4 questions we're going to cover today. I'm going to mention the 4 questions now, and then at the end we'll go back and review the answers to the questions. So the first question is a basic one. Multitasking feels like you get more done in less time. Yes or no? And you may have an answer to that one already. The second question is, with multitasking, are you actually more productive? So does the research show that you do get more done in less time? Yes or no? We're going to discuss that during our program tonight. And again, I'll go over this question at the end. The third question on our workshop sheet is, does multitasking affect stress? Yes or no? And the fourth question that we're going to address, does multitasking affect accuracy of our work? Yes or no? Again, I'm going to be talking about all of these things. I'm also going to talk about whether multitasking affects our ability to focus. So we're going to really hone in on what we're doing when we multitask. So first, I want to share with you my definition of multitasking. And it is the act of handling a few tasks within the same time frame. Note, I didn't say at the same time. I said within the same time frame. So, for example, within a 2-minute or 5-minute or 10 or 20-minute time frame. It's the act of doing multiple tasks. And I'm just going to mention a typical scenario that I hear from my clients as an example of multitasking. And you can probably think of your own multitasking experiences, but this is typical of what a client would tell me. I have a work project on my computer screen. I have a different work project on my desk. I'm going back and forth between the two of them as I think of something for one project, then I think of something for the other project. So I'm multitasking on those 2 things. Then my phone rings and somebody calls, and I'm having a conversation with somebody and still going back and forth between the two tasks I'm working on. And while I'm doing all of that, I'm trying to eat lunch at the same time. Is that a typical type of multitasking thing for you, where you're really doing multiple things at the same time? And a lot of people do that while they're trying to eat lunch also. So does a scenario like this, where you're going back and forth, especially between different work projects, sound familiar? Yeah, hands up. Hands up. Sounds familiar, multitasking? I hear that from so many people, which is why this is really an important topic that I do want to help people with. So let's talk about what the research says. The first thing that the research tells us is that when we think we're multitasking, we're actually doing what's called sequential tasking. We're not doing 3 things or 4 things at the same time. We're actually going back and forth and shifting between the activities. So our brain is not wired to do multiple things at the same time. It's not like, if you think about a computer, it's not like we have 4 computers next to each other and each computer is doing one thing, so we're getting 4 things done at the same time. We would essentially need 4 brains side by side to do that, because our brain does one thing at a time. So when we think we're doing 4 things at a time, we're really shifting back and forth from one task to another, back to the first, then to another task. And when I think of multitasking, I think of what a juggler does. A juggler is juggling pins. They're going back and forth from one target to another target. And you watch them and you can see it's stressful. And they're really working to focus and keep everything going straight. And that's really what we're doing also. We're trying to keep everything straight. And so, does a juggler look like they're stressed when they're trying to juggle? Often it does look like, wow, this must be stressful to keep this all going. And multitasking does increase our stress levels. It actually increases the cortisol level in our bodies, the stress hormone. And again, when we are multitasking, we're sequential tasking. So it's like we do one task, and then when we switch to the new task, it actually takes a little bit of a lag of a time for the brain to let go of the first task to start the new task. And that's called task residue or attention residue, that you keep it in your mind even when you're trying to shift to a new activity. And then when you shift to the new activity, it takes a moment for the brain to orient and pick up, okay, now what am I doing here? And then you start the task. So every time you switch back and forth in this sequential tasking, there's a little bit of a delay of letting go from the previous task, and a little delay to pick up and go forward with the new task. And those, we usually describe them in microseconds, but those microseconds really add up in time. And so what the research shows is that we're actually less efficient, less productive in a period of time by multitasking, because of all of those lags, because of those delays. And again, like a juggler, and they're working really hard to shift between watching the targets, so are we working hard to shift between our targets as we multitask. And so it causes stress. What about accuracy and errors? Well, because we're shifting back and forth, the research shows that multitasking is associated with increased errors. Again, because you're going back and forth, you're not keeping your tasks straight. What about our ability to focus on an activity? Does changing your focus and going back and forth do anything? Well, we have an attention filter in our brain. And when that filter becomes overloaded, overworked, because of so much information that you're trying to hold in it, it can really become overwhelmed. And what happens is the attention filtering system sends a message of stress to the brain and the body, and stress hormones can be released. Again, it's that feeling of stress. So multitasking is a process that makes us think we're getting more done in less time, but the research shows we're really not. And they've actually done research with some people who say, well, I'm used to multitasking, I'm really good at it. And they compare their accuracy and their efficiency to other people who know that it doesn't help. And the outcome is that even people who think they're great at multitasking make as many errors as those who know they're not great at it. And they waste as much time as people who realize that multitasking is not an efficiency builder. So I think it's really important to know the research out there and to understand, it's instinctive to try to multitask because I think, well, I'm such a busy person. If I do a few things at once, I can just get them all done at the same time. But again, as I explained, that's not really what happens. So I wanted to mention that. I do want to bring to your attention, though, there are a couple of exceptions to that rule. And that is when there are two tasks that use different parts of the brain, it is sometimes possible to combine those and do them at the same time. For example, you can listen to music and go to a gym and work out like on a treadmill or using some exercise equipment and listen to music at the same time. There's no lag, there's no obstacle with that. Again, the brain, those two activities are using different parts of the brain. So you can do that. And you could drive a car and listen to a radio or listen to music or even a podcast. If it's not a podcast that's too complicated and making you focus too much on details when you really need to be focused on the street when you're driving. But, and this is a big example that I bring up, I spoke and I mentioned that you can drive and listen to music or listen to talk radio, but you can't drive and text at the same time, because when you're driving, you're looking out on the street, and when you're texting, you're looking at your phone. And you can't be looking at the same time at both targets. So I try to explain that and tell busy people how dangerous it is to try to drive and try to text at the same time. Again, multitasking is not a help in most cases to get more done in less time or to get work done appropriately without errors. So let's go back to our workshop questions from the beginning. I just want to mention those. Number 1, is multitasking feels like you get more done in less time? People often instinctively, unless they're educated and learn about the research, people often think yes. But number 2, with multitasking, are you really more productive? Do you really get more done in less time? Are you really more efficient or more productive? And the answer to that is no, because as I described, we have all those lags. We have that residue lag in giving up the previous task, and you have a little lag in catching on to, now what do I need to do in this new task, or what am I up to if I'm going back to a task? The third question in our workshop, Does multitasking affect stress? Yes. Multitasking is stressful because we're handling so much information at the same time. And the research shows that multitasking increases our cortisol levels, the levels of our stress hormone. And the last question in the workshop, does multitasking affect accuracy? And the research shows that multitasking is associated with more errors because, again, we're going back and forth between different activities. We're losing track of what we're doing, of what we did. And very often, when I give the example that I did in the beginning of my clients where they're looking at a task on their computer, they have a task on their desk, and then they're talking on the phone and eating lunch at the same time. Isn't it common? And sometimes when you're on the phone and multitasking, don't you sometimes have to say, sorry, what did you say? I just missed what you said. Or you may not want to say, I missed what you said, but you just ask them to repeat what they said because you missed it. And why did you miss it? Because you were looking either at your computer screen or your table or thinking of something else, and you lost track because you were multitasking. So I'll bet you can probably think of examples in your life when you were multitasking and you lost focus, you lost attention on something. It is so common. So again, just to briefly review, multitasking is a stress trigger. It sets off our stress hormones. It causes lag times, so it causes us to be actually less productive, less efficient. It's associated with more errors, and it gets in our way of focusing. It overloads our focusing system. So, multitasking is a habit that does not serve us well, with the exception of the few cases that I mentioned. And for some people, just knowing that, they can just let it go. And I hope that works for you, that you can just let it go if you've heard that it doesn't help. For many people, it's a long-standing habit, and habits are hard to change. And I've been speaking many times in our group about adopting habits that can help us and make us more productive and efficient and successful, and letting go of habits that do not support our stress. And I see lots of hearts and lots of pictures coming out to support us here. So I love that. Thank you for helping support our community. I love that. And again, I want to help all of you try and let go of multitasking. Again, just by education and hearing this, a lot of people can say, you know what, I'm just not going to do that anymore. And for some people, it's a deeply ingrained habit. Habits are hard to change. If you are interested and feel you'd like to upgrade your habits, you want to build new habits to support your success in your life, in your home, in your work, and let go of habits that do not help, like multitasking, feel free to reach out to me. I am always happy to speak to people in our group to help you create your best life, to help you create your best success. So I hope this was helpful. I always invite you and remind you to check into our group during the week. There will be a poll, at least one poll during the week. So I want to make sure that your voice is heard and you get to vote in the poll. And make sure you check in our group during the week for all of the information. And again, back here again next Sunday for our next live and our next great topic. So thank you all for joining me, and I will see you soon.